20146 is your SMS line. This is your economic review. Now, the Pubs, Entertainment and Restaurants Association of Kenya, PERAC, the border and taxi operators, together with the fresh produce suppliers, want President Uhuru Kenyatta to scrap off the ongoing dusk to dawn curfew. The associations say businesses from the said sectors continue to bear the brunt of the impact of the COVID-19 restrictions, even as other economic sectors continue to operate freely. It's now estimated that at least 30% of bars and restaurants that were in operation before the pandemic have shut down completely, rendering about 160,000 people jobless. In early January, the head of civil service, Joseph Kenyans, issued a statement on behalf of presidency announcing the extension to the dusk to dawn curfew by 3 months to March 12th. Now, with the curfew expected to lapse in just 9 days, it will be 15 days shy of a year since the country was put under a curfew, a restriction that businesses now hope will come to an end. Just before we cross over to the panel that we have for you this morning to help us go through some of the top issues that we have for you on our economic review, let's see exactly where they're coming from in terms of what have been the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. Good. Let's look at the unemployment numbers in Q3. And from there, you can actually see exactly where we are, that indeed, well, if you look at those quarters, then you will see exactly where they're coming from in terms of that, with age 20 to 24 really being among the biggest contributors of that, 25 to 29 as well, all the way on a decreasing value to 60 to 64. Fine. Let's look at unemployment by age again. Similarly, the same as well, and that is really for those people who've been looking for their jobs. That's in Q3 for more than 4 weeks and above. That's exactly what that strict definition really says, and you'll see exactly the same trend that is in the other definition also reflecting them. All right, let's look at what has been our quarter by quarter GDP growth so that we can actually see exactly what the effects of the pandemic has been as well, because that is the conversation. That's the conversation again. That's a confirmation, sorry, because indeed we were in a recession in Q3 as well, which therefore begs the question: is it time to reopen the economy and also lift the curfew? And this morning we have to take what has been a medical approach, because we do know that we went into the curfew because of medical reasons. Stop the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. This morning, to help us go through that headline, we are joined by Dr. Victor Ngani, who is the Medical Director, RFH Healthcare. Dr. Ngani Victor, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Happy to have you around. Is it okay for me to say Happy New Year?
Yes, actually, we haven't met the whole year.
We haven't met the whole year. Good morning, sir. All right. Someone is going to ask you the question, Dr. Ngani. Is it time to lift the curfew, going by just what has been an underperforming economy during this time we've been under curfew?
Well, this has been the big question, I think, since March last year, because it's a difficult debate between safety and the economy. So if you let everything proceed as it would without any restrictions, as we've seen in Tanzania, then the impact is grave and a lot of people just lose their lives. And the question then, is it worth it to have running businesses when people don't survive? The second question then comes up in the Kenyan scenario, where around December and January, we had very few infections, and more or less you could see the country was back to normal, less with the exception of this curfew and a few restrictions. And the cases were very low at that time. And the question then was, is there any benefit in maintaining restrictions at a time when you don't see infections, people are struggling, businesses are being lost? But then I want to add some caution. If you've noticed the trend over the last few weeks, and I did tweet something about it much earlier, about a month ago, that the weeks we're in now have proven to be quite challenging. In fact, as it stands today, we are witnessing an incredible surge in numbers of COVID-19. We in hospitals, the beds already, even on where we work, the beds are almost getting full, and we're having critical and severe disease. This is a disease that is evolving. If you'd asked me this question around January and December,
Yes.
we were baffled because October, November, we had a huge surge and people were, we were worried that we didn't run out of beds. Then suddenly, almost miraculously, COVID just disappeared, and across the facilities, we didn't have much pressure. And so there was that impression that maybe we are past the peak. However, what's happening now in March, late February, March, is telling us that maybe we haven't seen anything yet. And so I'm very hesitant to recommend a complete lifting of the restrictions. I must mention that only 7% of the population gets severe or critical disease. But 7% of 1 million people is a big number, let alone 7% of 40 million.
Yes.
And what we are seeing in our ICUs do not give me the confidence to say go ahead and lift restrictions. In fact, because there's a lot of evolution, we probably have to wait a bit longer.
Yes. All right, Dr. Victor Ngani, let's therefore look at where we are in the last 24 hours, if that is exactly what is going to inform what has been our trend so far. I'm just going to go through that data. Fine. That if you look at where we were, it's 331 cases in the last 24 hours, and that has been on an increasing trend again this week as well. And again, we are talking about the arrival of vaccines in the country that is also going to continue now arriving on a graduated basis. Is that enough to inform that, well, since the vaccines are here and the vaccination process is going to begin, then you can actually start saying, well, tell people to put on masks, continue with economic activities, leave the curfew in favor of the businesses that are relating from those effects as we wait for more vaccinations to continue in the country?
Well, a couple of things with regards to vaccination. The first thing is that it's a phased vaccination process.
Yes.
And the initial doses we are getting 1.2 million doses, and this will go to the frontline workers and essential workers who need to be out even in the midst of a pandemic.
Yes.
And it's going to be progressive. It will take a couple of months before this 1.2 is given. And in the next phase, then we have people who are at risk of severe disease, and so on. So vaccination is a medium-term to long-term solution. It's not an immediate solution. Yet in March of 2021, which is where we are right now, we are witnessing significant spread across the country. So therefore, with regards to what you're facing today, vaccination is, yes, a very good thing. It has to be done as soon as possible. It's going to help us in the medium term, but it's not going to be, you don't feel that immediately. Our hope is to vaccinate 30% and perhaps an additional 10% by 2023, and therefore it's not going to happen immediately. It's not going to. It's not something we'll see. If you look at yesterday's numbers, yes, 330 out of 4,700 tests.
Yes.
That's about 7% positivity rate, and you'd see we declined way below 5%. We are seeing very, very few cases. When you see the numbers creeping up again, there's reason for us to be concerned. There's something else in the testing scene. We have now introduced what is called the rapid antigen test. If you've seen adverts about some tests that cost about 3,000 shillings, this is what we're talking about. And many healthcare facilities have taken this up. Unfortunately, the data from this testing is not being aggregated in the national data. And you'll find that we are now testing a way much more than the 4,700, but it's not fully coordinated and put in the data that we're seeing. And this is why it seems to be even below. But in fact, if you look at actual statistics, you may find that the numbers are much, much higher than the 300 being reported today.
All right, and another question that anybody's going to ask you, Dr. Ngani Victor, as well as we talk this morning, is that, well, there seems to be this general feeling that, well, even the enforcing of the COVID-19 rules is sort of relaxed. People are not walking around with masks. If you walk around Matatu, some of them are carrying passengers at full capacity. But then the numbers that we're recording, even after schools have reopened, is that, well, there are not that many as you would expect, even with this relaxed sort of environment around the COVID-19 protocols in the country. Why? Right now, we could be talking about so many numbers, but indeed, there are not that many as you would expect, Dr. Ngani Victor.
So that's exactly what we are telling the people is not the case, because we work in the hospitals. Yes. So we're the first ones to see when that changes. So we were quite perplexed, because initially we thought that with the opening of schools, with the opening of bars and other areas, you'd see, and definitely Kenyans, we've sort of thrown restrictions out of the window. So we thought that by late January, early February, we'd see a big spike. We didn't see that. But that spike that we were expecting, it's happening now. And this is the message you're passing around. Just Just ask around your community. See the number of families that suddenly are having very severe COVID cases. It's an evolving disease. There are many mortalities happening now. There are many patients in hospital right now. The beds are getting. This is actually a surge, and there's a bit of a concern amongst the medical community that this surge we are seeing now could actually exceed the surge that we saw in October, November.
Yes.
And so those numbers we were expecting as a result of the laxity in adherence, and that's a reality. The impact is being witnessed today. It's actually very real, and that's what's happening in our country.
Pretty much. So as we clear this conversation, Dr. Victor, well, lift the curfew in favor of the economy now from where you stated this morning, or, well, enforce it further?
Well, as it stands today, we'd had this conversation actually a little bit earlier in a different forum, and the conclusion was we need to look at the next few weeks first. The next few weeks at the time was about 3 weeks ago, and currently for sure we are seeing an upward trend. We don't have enough data yet to tell whether this is going to be sustained, whether it's going to go out of hand, or it's going to be something we're able to manage. What we know, however, is that the measures that Kenya put in place, this is why we didn't go the Tanzania route almost immediately. This is why we haven't had the systems completely overwhelmed. And therefore, the next few weeks will be critical to determine the extent and the severity of this surge. If this surge is going to be sort of a slow curve, despite the laxity we are seeing, then yes, there's an argument for lifting the restrictions in favor of the economy.
Yes.
Becomes worse, then we really have to strengthen those restrictions. And I must say, the areas where it makes a lot of sense and the areas where the risk is just unnecessary, I've been very clear about, in particular, bars. I do not think that we should be having that discussion now. Yes, it's important, it's an economic factor, but then in terms of the risks, there are certain restrictions. Yes, you have to open schools, perhaps, you have to have other businesses run, but in particular, things that will make the people less compliant, such as if you're drunk, then I would urge we be very careful about those kinds of discussions.
Do you feel that the sentiment from the government is to sort of continue testing now or vaccinate? Where do we get the balance now? Do we spend the money to get more testing kits into the country, or do we spend the money in getting more vaccines in the country?
So we have to do both. The testing and management options need to continue.
Yes.
That has to be done, and we have to be quite intentional about it. The vaccination train, this should be looked at as a different path altogether, for which the resources should be sought separately, so that it doesn't interfere with treatment. Because vaccination, the impact will be seen much later. It will not happen right now. And if we don't vaccinate, that's going to be a problem. If we stop testing and stop treating, that's going to be a problem. So these two must be funded appropriately.
Pretty much. Dr. Ngani Victor, thank you very much for taking your time this morning to speak to us here on Metropol Television Business AM. And this is exactly the conversation that we're having on how other sectors and industries are crying for the reopening of the economy. We take a short break here. Once we come back, let's get some of those members then of this industry to talk to us as to why they think that the economy should be reopened, despite what the medical section of the economy is saying, once we come back.